Introduction. He's a Moroccan-born actor, writer, producer, and he's currently based in Los Angeles. And in theater, he's known for leading the world premiere of the remarkable rooming house of Madame Lamont by Tennessee Williams. And in film, he's known for the Milk Tea, America, and Amalgamation Eulogy. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you must have seen his film yesterday, American. And for those of you who haven't, please check it out because it's an award-winning film. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And it's really cleverly made. And it really just keeps you on your toes all the time. So I'll hand this over to you.
Thank you.
Right.
So hello everyone. Kind of hard to follow someone like Cheryl, such an informed point of view. I will admit that I'm relatively new at filmmaking, so my perspective is a little more scrappy. So we'll get into it. It's less so about distribution for me right now at this phase of my journey as a filmmaker. It's more so about experimentation and just trying to get stuff done. So the title of my speech is basically the challenges of making a short, but really it should be the challenges of making a short with zero money and a lot of student debt. So we'll just jump right into it. There's basically three different parts of making a film, as I'm sure all of you filmmakers know. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning, you have to set up a lot of expository. That is the script. You have to get a team. You have to introduce all these characters to, the process. Then you got the middle, where all these moving parts that you've introduced are starting to culminate and turn into something. Everything is becoming contextualized, all this information. And then the end is, hopefully, this catharsis, where you can look at everything that has just happened and smile. Or not. Or not. That happens a lot.
Still smiling.
Yeah, right. Sometimes. So basically, what I'm going to talk about is why. Why would you make a film? Hopefully it comes from the right place. It's different than a documentary. To write a narrative is just as much of a social commentary as doing a documentary. And it really informs everybody into your perspective. So you got to understand who you're talking to and why you're even making this in the first place. If you are solid and truly believe in what it is, the message that is you're trying to convey, people will see that and they will be attracted to your project. I'm speaking from somebody who doesn't have the money to say, hey, I really like your work in this. I can pay you if you want to work on my film. That's one level of communication. But here, you're approaching it from a perspective of trying to get people, to rally, almost to campaign, to tell this story and have people believe in you. So basically, what you want to do is find a team that not only you trust as artists, but that you trust their moral view, their moral compass, that it's similar to you in some way, or at least it aligns with the story that it is that you're trying to tell, especially since they're not getting paid. The first challenge of not paying people is actually having to show up and to be on time to things. So that's another level of trust that you have to have with them. So anyway, I'm going to go through basically a list. You got to figure out your script. You got to figure out your location. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, talk about challenges. There's 100 million challenges that I could talk about in terms of filmmaking. But the main ones that stick out to me in the pre-section is figure out your script, figure out your team, figure out locations, and then figure out food. I know it sounds kind of ridiculous, but you got to feed people. You got to keep morale up. You got to find a way to make things fresh when you're making a film, especially when you're not paying people to make this film. So that's really the pre. These are the general broad strokes. When you're in production, there are many things that will happen on set, as I'm sure all of you filmmakers understand, that sometimes compromise the film or the direction that you're going in the film, especially when you're working with a lot of different people, a lot of different egos. Ideas can be presented, and some of them can be really beneficial, but some of them can also compromise the root of what it is that you're trying to tell. So staying sturdy as the head kind of producer or filmmaker, staying sturdy in your why is probably the most important part when you're on set. Making sure that things are moving smoothly, making sure you're taking the time to understand everybody's desires, everybody's needs on set, and having them feel heard is a huge, huge aspect, especially when you're not paying them again. Be on time. If you're not on time, How are you gonna have anybody else be on time? Have everything ready when you're there. If you have to be scrambling, you know, if you're like in the middle of, and this feels a little redundant because I'm speaking to a room full of accomplished filmmakers, but you know, I'm excited for the discussion afterwards because, again, I'm new. So essentially, what you want to do basically is to make sure that you have a plan of action. If somebody has a plan of action and that person is good enough at really rallying and making everybody stay, then you will come out with a product. But if you can't do that, then don't expect for anybody else to be able to do that for you. Very, very important. That all kind of goes under the umbrella of the team that I was telling you about. Really, really trust your team. Keep the ball rolling, make sure everybody eats, and then establishing a set language is very, very, very important. When you're acquiring your team, there's going to be a lot of communication that has to happen, and sometimes there are middlemen, but as long as everybody speaks the same language, then at least there's some sort of forward momentum that is possible. Keep spirits high. I know this all sounds like a lot of like pressure and everything, and it's kind of easy. I mean, for me, I'm really only speaking to my experience. But for me, when the pressure started to really get to me, I could maybe start to let that show a little bit. And that has a way larger effect on morale on set than you would think. So even if you have the flames of hell burning under your feet, you got to somehow make it look like, you know, you're on a beach in Cabo, having fun. Just have fun. That's something that really helped me a lot. Once you get past this point of making the actual thing, you have a film in the can. It's really exciting. Everyone feels this accomplishment, but you're only 66.6666% of the way through. You've only really done 2/3 of the work. So now you're in post. And I found in my little experience that post can very easily become a limbo of sorts. The momentum sort of drops a little bit. Everybody's coming off of this high of having achieved this thing, and now it's your job as this filmmaker, as the head or the conceptualizer, to keep all these moving parts going forward. And sometimes that means introducing more people into the process that weren't even involved before. So again, if you have no money to do this, you're deferring payment. Eventually you will have the money to pay these people, but what a tough job it is to now have to, after having done all of this, and it's a lot, I'm breezing through this, but all of those steps take a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of energy from a lot of people. So it can kind of be demotivating if they don't really see any sort of return. But this point, when you get to post, is probably the most important part. You have to introduce sound. Sound is 65% of the film. So if you don't have a good sound person during, then you really need a really good sound person after. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But sound people can be tough to find, good sound people. ADR sometimes is needed. You have to get somebody to, digitally record all of the little footsteps and the tea cup getting put on the plate and everything like that. And that's a whole nother expense. The assembly cut, the editors, the rough cut, going through dailies and all this, it's very overwhelming sometimes, but once you're at this point, you know that you have enough, hopefully, enough footage that whatever it is, and you've built a lot of contingency into your actual production, so you have options, and it's not so overwhelming because now you have choices. Choices are good. Be realistic and objective about what it is that you're doing. Again, Cheryl was talking about making films with the intent of distribution or festivals, but I'm just talking about making them to make them so that you can see how you work and process and everything like that. As long as you stay realistic about your goals, then you don't try for anything that you're not. You know what I mean? You don't try to pretend like you're trying, there's a lot of false gusto that happens, but as long as you stay centered, I think that's how you get to the truth of what it is that you're trying to do and keep things real and genuine. So now we'll talk about fundraising. Cheryl went into this probably better than I could. But there are definitely a few different ways of fundraising. Crowdsourcing is one of them. Something that I've learned that I have a big moral dilemma about is taking money from your friends and family. I see this all the time. I go on Facebook, And I have a lot of friends that are filmmakers and everything like that, and every month or every other month, there's like, oh, we got a $5,000 donation goal, we have a $10,000 donation goal, or whatever. Will you give me $50? Will you give me $100? And, you know, of course, I want to be contributing, but at a certain point, it just becomes, you know, it's a little bit morally gray, we'll say. Who are you making this for? Why are you doing this in the first place? So, something really interesting that I've been delving into recently is finding networks of other filmmakers who want to see other filmmakers make good films that they believe in. Seed and Spark is actually probably the one that's the best for this. Indiegogo and oh, what's the other one?
Kickstarter.
Right. Those are a little bit more so conducive to, you know, sending links to your grandma and hoping she'll give you $100 for your film. But Seed and Spark, what it does is it puts all of your information, it puts your sizzle reel, it puts your description in this network, this social network, with other filmmakers who might be doing something that's a little bit similar to you. And not only is this a really good way for you to raise money for your films, but it's also a really good way for you to network with people, like-minded people, who are going to be doing the same thing that you are for years to come. Do we have a question?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And what kind of success rate do they have, percentage-wise?
It's actually quite low. Seed and Spark is the highest, somewhere around 80, I think.
Seed and Spark.
Wow.
Seed and Spark. But Indiegogo has like a 42% success rate. And if there's a certain threshold with Indiegogo, if you don't raise a certain amount of money, it's a percentage, then all the money goes back to everybody that's donated, and then you're just kind of left there, you know, in a puddle of your failure. So you kind of have to bounce back from that morally. Anyway, so now we've talked about fundraising. Fundraising can really happen at a lot of different points. Some people do it in the beginning, some people do it towards the end. I chose to do it at the end because, as you said, development, to get people to develop your projects is hard. What short films are really good for is proof of content, something called proof of content, which is basically the first step. If you want to pitch something to somebody, a series in particular, and you have some sort of proof of concept, some sort of idea that you can present to them, that's what this is good for. And that, I think, is more so developmental. You know, that's where you can fundraise developmentally. Or you have like a really rich family and you're really lucky and everything is okay for you. So good on you if that's the case. Ask me for my email after this. Now we have the money, yeah? Now you've fundraised. You went from literally nothing and an idea and people who believed in you, and you've deferred your payments. Even if you have union actors, there are ways, particularly with SAGs, you can defer payments on micro budgets, which I have done. But now you got to pay people. You got to do that on time. You got to do that in a professional manner. You have to make sure that your invoices are processed correctly. If it's a small team, usually you're wearing all of the hats. So you're not only worrying about putting the film together, but now you also have to worry about all these logistics, all these legalities, making sure contracts are signed and everybody's happy. And then finally, now you have this piece of film, you have this little chunk of your mind and everybody else's mind who you've collaborated with. And it's time to put it into film festivals, ideally. Distribution is not something that I'm very familiar with, and it's something I'm very excited to learn more about. But for now, all I can really speak to is the submission phase, which costs money. So you want to build that into whatever your campaign goal is, and basically come up with a good pitch, a good log line, and approach people like a niche, and hope that eventually, there's some sort of friction that happens that causes heat and eventually creates a fire that you can just sit at and bask in for a little bit. So just to wrap things up, discuss the phases of the pre, the post, or the pre, the production, and then the post. And the beauty of filmmaking, I think, is that there are going to be challenges, no matter what, and no matter what level it is. You're making a 5-minute short, or you're making a feature, a 90-minute feature. There are going to be a million challenges. And what's beautiful is that if I'm given this film, or if Avnisha's giving this film, or if Cheryl's given the film, that's 3 different films, even though if it's the same script. Depending on how you choose to, overcome all the challenges and obstacles that come about, it's going to turn into your particular thing. So if anything, the challenges shouldn't be demotivating. If anything, the challenges should be that thing that inspires you and truly makes you feel like grounded and rooted in what you're doing. So that is my rough overview of
own experience.
That's all we can
And
do.
everyone has different experiences, even though we all are making films and watching films. And it's that personal touch that makes it more valuable. Is there any question from the audience? Does anyone want to ask anything? Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, I just want maybe share some tricks or tips about setting priorities, because that's one
Yeah.
obstacle for me. I mean, I heard all the ingredients, but then you encounter obstacles and then you have to make choices. And you
Right.
said, well, choices is a good thing, but still, how do you set priorities regarding to these choices?
Right. I would say integrity. You know, I think it's mainly about what you're trying to do, and as long as well, and also productivity. That's a good question. I think it varies depending on the circumstances. Sometimes, what do you mean specifically in terms of challenges and prioritizing?
Well, sometimes you have to choose between two goods. Then,
Right.
what's the best? Yeah, and so.
Right. That comes down to instinct, I think. That's
Okay.
intrinsic. And that's what I mean by everybody, like there are 3 different films, you know, if you give it to 3 different people, even though it's the same route, the same, you know, script. And I think that's the beauty of it, you know.
Or worst case scenario, you have to choose between two beds.
Yeah.
Could also be
Right, right.
more likely.
Yeah, you're in a luxurious place if you have 2 goods to choose from. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I just want to add something on the crowdfunding topic. The way I see it at this stage, I haven't used it yet, but I've worked it into funding plans for several projects. And I think the way that we should see that, I'm talking from the perspective of short films, is 5,000 euros to 8,000 euros is kind of the max that you should want to achieve with that. And the kind of way that I think is wise is to have that slot in as only a segment of a budget. So if there's a production with a budget of 30,000 euros, then you crowdfund 5,000. So that crowdfunding is not the holy grail and
No,
the do or die on that project, but that it's only maybe just to get that last little bit that you need.
Right. Something
yeah.
I didn't talk about actually that I did write down but got lost in the moment is grants. There's a lot of grants, and I think that's another very, very important way of getting the capital there.
Don't steal my show, I have to talk about that.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.